Long ago, there was no such thing as magic among humanity, nor was there any desire to learn it. But as civilizations expanded and people grew tired of doing tremendous labor the hard way, they sought out the creation of real magic and soon harnessed their own unique kinds. Soon enough, they realized the long-term benefits of passing down their magic to the next generations in order to keep the usage of magic alive, so they wished for the possibility of such magic being inherited through their bloodlines. This feat was proved achievable, which led the original creators of each unique kind of magic to keep their work as secrets passed down only through their bloodline, causing a nation of mages to be born named Yusta. As the ways to cultivate such magic were safeguarded within each family, they used their powers to their advantage, making a deal that in exchange for them using such magic to protect the country from possible invaders and hostile monsters roaming the lands, they would receive high statuses in society and great privilege as nobility. Now in the present, the protagonist of the story, Hermes, has just been born into the house of Marquis Frenbreed, though it was previously known as the house of Duke Frenbreed, but they have since been demoted in ranks due to giving birth to a lack of magically proficient heirs. Despite being the second-born son, Hermes is already beloved by his father, the Marquis, due to his apparent vast magical aptitude. Believing Hermes to be the next great mage of their family and hence would bring them back their family honor as Duke, his father names him as the next heir in line for the title and orders the entire house to treat him with the utmost care, much to the shock of his firstborn son, who watches on the sidelines speechlessly. The story then cuts to 4 years later, during which Hermes has grown into a toddler who has a loving father-son relationship with the Marquis. As he runs up to his father and gushes about how he was complimented by his teacher for having great potential in magic, the latter picks the young boy up happily and praises him as well, already anticipating how much lineage magic he will possess once the time for his magical aptitude test comes. While the maids of the household also join in on showering Hermes with compliments, his older brother Chris watches them from the shadows resentfully. However, his presence is soon noticed by the Marquis, who treats him completely differently from Hermes, giving him an icy glare and berating his firstborn son coldly for looking pathetic in comparison to Hermes. Hurt and embarrassed by his father's words, Chris runs off in shame, though Hermes does not know what to make of the situation. Later that day, Hermes is outside in the courtyard reading about lineage magic, since he became curious ever since he heard his father mention it. He finds out that it is a special kind of magic that only the nobles are able to use and gushes about it to his companion, Kati. She turns out to be Katya von Traakia, the daughter of Duke von Traakia, and the heiress to the title, as well as Hermes' childhood friend. Unimpressed, she tells him that she already hears about it all the time from her tutor, as lineage magic is said to be much more powerful and unique than the typical kind of magic normal people use. While he continues to read from his book, Kati sulks over how she wants to play with him, and yet he is too busy gushing over magic to do so. He pays no mind to her sulky mood and suddenly asks what kind of magic she would like to be, as he claims that he wants to be the kind who fights bad guys and upholds justice, much like the heroes in legends. At this, Kati is positively influenced by Hermes' earnest wish and cheers him on. It then jumps to another 3 years later, with Hermes turning 7 years old and finally going through his magical aptitude test. Much to their horror, the results reveal that he possesses absolutely zero lineage magic within him, meaning that he has no magical abilities at all. As the Marquis starts to have a breakdown over this news, the tester simply laments how Hermes is not favored by God after all. Overcome with disappointment and rage over how his plans to retake the rank of Duke are ruined, the once loving father toward Hermes shows his true colors and becomes a hate-filled monster of a man, shoving Hermes away when the latter tries to approach him and berating him for being absolutely worthless, much to the little boy's shock and horror. Soon after, the Marquis throws Hermes into a dungeon cell and continues to spew hateful words toward him, his fatherly love no longer present at all. At this, Hermes desperately pleads with his father to give him another chance, claiming that he will work even harder to become the great mage that he wants him to be. Unfortunately for him, his father does not want to hear any of it, as he already believes that lineage magic must be a great gift bestowed by God himself. As he has none, there is no more possibility for him to redeem himself. As he turns to leave the little boy behind in the dungeon, he tells Hermes that he will only let him out once he proves that he can use lineage magic, though highly doubts it. And with that, Hermes' new life begins as a no longer wanted child, left behind in the dungeon. After an unknown number of days, Hermes is visited by his older brother, Chris, who wears a smug expression on his face when he sees how badly the former's life is turning out. After years of resentment building up inside of Chris due to the blatant favoritism shown to Hermes, Chris takes advantage of the situation after hearing about Hermes' predicament from their father, and uses his own lineage magic to attack him with the excuse of forcing an awakening out of the young boy. Helpless and unable to fight back, Hermes can do nothing but accept the abuse from Chris. The latter proceeds to vent out his anger even more, claiming that the younger turned away from him just because their father doted on him more. At this, Hermes also starts to blame himself for never noticing how Chris was being neglected, as he was simply happy with studying magic and getting their father's attention. Even as the older boy sees how helpless Hermes is at that moment, he holds no remorse for taking his petty revenge and arrogantly laughs that he will be the great mage of the family instead of the younger. Sometime later, Cady secretly visits Hermes in the dungeon, cheering him up instantly. She finds that he is hurt badly and immediately deduces that it is because of his family. Regretfully, she apologizes for being unable to help him at all, as she cannot even heal him with her current magic capabilities. Although she is right to call his family out for abusing him so badly just because he lacks lineage magic, Hermes still thinks it is his own fault for being so-called defective and thinks that it is more than enough for him to be able to eat. At this, Cady snaps him out of it and tells him with a determined voice that she still believes in him, especially since she knows him best as someone who loves magic more than anyone else. Cupping his face in her hands, she encourages him to continue his diligence, eager for him to achieve his dream of becoming a great mage and stand by her side once more. Cady's words cheer Hermes up and motivate him to work hard at achieving lineage magic, as he tells her that he will be let out of the dungeon once he is able to. He thanks her with a warm smile, flustering her. She soon leaves before she is found out, though not before claiming that she believes he will get out of there as per their promise. And so, Hermes continues to work hard at studying magic with Cady's constant encouragement, as well as consistent secret visits, in spite of his terrible living conditions and the continued abuse he suffers at the hands of his family. However, as 3 more years pass, nothing changes in Hermes' situation. Instead, he is soon greeted with sad news from Cady herself, who tells him that she will be unable to return and visit him anymore as she has been offered a marriage proposal to the second prince of the kingdom, Aster, who is also known to be the current strongest user of lineage magic alive, as well as the strongest contender for the throne. With a melancholy expression, she admits that she plans to accept the proposal, as it will bring great honor to her family. Even so, she frantically assures that she will do her best to hold off the official engagement for at least another half a year and help Hermes get out, though she is suddenly interrupted by Chris, who tells her that it will not happen with a smug smile. He further reveals that along with her engagement to Prince Aster, their own friend-breed family will be taken in by the latter as well due to their good relations with one another. In addition to that, Chris has been appointed to become Aster's right-hand man. Regardless, Cady shouts that she does not care and instead questions why Aster refuses to even check on Hermes' condition if he will be taking the friend breed family under his wing, to which Chris reveals that the prince has ordered them to get rid of Hermes due to his lack of magic aptitude, even citing that he has no need for useless people. As Hermes is horrified by this revelation, Chris proceeds to command the soldiers to take the former away and dispose of him, effectively disowning him from the family. At this, the 2 childhood friends are unable to do anything but watch as they are forced apart, with Cady begging them to stop, as she claims she will try to negotiate with Aster. As Hermes is taken away, he wonders to the god above and his father what he should do just to simply earn their love. Later, Hermes finds that he has been dropped off and abandoned to be on his own in a terrible part of town. The buildings around him are clearly run down and broken, while the people sitting around outside visibly look poor, sickly, and in bad condition. As the young boy wanders around, he soon feels himself being watched and realizes that he is right when a gang of rough-looking men approach him with clear, malicious intent in their expressions. Fearing for his life, he tries to run away, but he is quickly caught by them due to his small stature and starts to get beaten up by them, as they realize that he has probably been thrown out by his noble family and decide to use him as a punching bag simply to let out their resentment toward the upper class. Just as he believes that he is about to perish under their hands, one of the attackers is suddenly struck with lightning magic by someone. As the group, including Hermes, turns to see the perpetrator, it turns out to be a beautiful young woman in a gown of roses who criticizes the men for ganging up on a small child. The mysterious woman's face soon changes from a look of disgust to a mischievous one, citing how she will enjoy beating the men up for their actions. The men are not intimidated by her at first as they start to activate their own magic, though she easily defeats them before they are even able to land a counterattack on her. As she continues to get rid of the rest of the gang, Hermes watches her in awe as he wonders what kind of magic she is using, as there seems to be a large variety in the different spells she is casting. He recalls how people tend to only be able to use one unique kind of lineage magic, and yet the woman before him is using a much too strong version of general magic, which is said to be quite weak in comparison. As the woman is almost done defeating all of the men, the remaining survivors finally recognize her as the notorious Sky Witch, Rose. At this, she taunts them for taking too long to figure out her true identity, then proceeds to pull the full force of her magical capabilities out by chanting out a spell and casting her real lineage magic onto them called Hlidskjalf, which is named after the seat of Odin in Norse mythology. And with that, the rest of the group is completely defeated, though she clarifies they are still alive. She turns to Hermes and reassures him that he is safe, though he suddenly notices something and warns her quickly that someone is using sniping magic on her from behind. At this, she manages to turn around and pinpoint the last person, who is a sniper hiding in the buildings nearby. After getting rid of the person, she redirects her attention back onto Hermes and praises him for being able to perceive such faraway magic at his age, then proceeds to ask for his identity gently as she introduces herself as Rose. At this point, Hermes realizes that he may be at a turning point in his life, as his first meeting with Rose may hold the key to his survival. While Rose finishes healing Hermes' wounds, the latter shyly thanks her for saving his life, to which she lightheartedly reassures him not to worry about it since she is annoyed by the gangsters anyway. She does note how strange they were able to take advantage of him and beat him up when he has quite good perception skills regarding magic, making her assume that he is actually quite strong in reality. Her assumption suddenly reminds Hermes of all of the abusive words he received from his father for not turning out like his expectations, and before he realizes it, his eyes start to uncontrollably tear up in sadness. Shocked and confused by his reaction, Rose panics and questions if he is still hurt somewhere, to which he quickly clarifies while sobbing that he always wanted to become a powerful mage like her, but is unable to since he has no power at all. He proceeds to let out how it is useless for him no matter how much he trains, to which Rose asks him to tell her his whole story for her to understand. A while later, Rose sympathizes with the young boy's tragic upbringing and current helpless situation, giving him a comforting and understanding hug. While he is taken aback by her gesture, she proceeds to comment how the nobles of their country are still acting high and mighty, despite essentially borrowing another's power. Disgusted at how nothing has changed in the system, with a serious face, she tells Hermes not to listen to such idiots, even if he possesses no lineage magic at all. However, just as she says this, it properly hits her that the young boy before her truly does not have any lineage magic at all, which only adds to Hermes' insecurities. But once he double confirms it is true, Rose suddenly cheers up and praises him for being amazing, as she sees him as the perfect diamond in the rough for her to train. She does get slightly carried away when she even starts to gush over what a cute child he is, though soon regains her composure and apologizes. Moving on, she goes back to being serious and asks Hermes if he really likes magic, to which he sincerely answers that he does, even though he has no lineage magic. At this, she suddenly holds onto his hands and starts to float up into the sky with him, stating that he has heavily misunderstood something about magic and she will do her best to correct it. As they fly through the sky, Rose states that though it is true he can do nothing to change the fact that he possesses no lineage magic, it does not mean he is unable to harness any other kind of strong magic. In fact, such ideology was passed down by the arrogant nobles who thought of themselves as superior, revealing that magic was not something gifted by God, but rather created through the calculated reasoning and logic of humans long ago. Due to this, if a person possesses no specific lineage magic, they actually have more freedom to create any kind of magic as long as they are trained properly. She concludes that, though lineage magic can be seen as a gift, it is also a curse as one is restricted by the one kind of magic they inherit from their bloodline. With a proud smile, Rose concludes that Hermes has escaped the curse of lineage magic and, rather, has the potential to become the mage who has the most freedom in the world. As Hermes finally starts to realize the benefits of his situation, Rose admits that she has been looking for a person like him for a long time, then proceeds to ask him to become her disciple. Even so, Hermes is still shocked and suspicious of the offer, though he decides to believe in Rose's words when he sees how lovingly and vividly she speaks about the true beauty of magic. Seeing how she is someone who loves magic as much as he does, he is convinced by her sincerity and accepts her offer. The story then cuts to 5 years later, during which a now teenage Kati is seen running towards somewhere. She briefly recaps that ever since the day she could do nothing but watch as Hermes was pulled away from her and forcibly kicked out of his family, she has been studying and training tirelessly to fulfill her duties as a noble and fiancée of Prince Aster. Additionally, it helps her to avoid the feelings of regret over the past. However, no matter how hard she tries, she still does not have a good relationship with Aster. She recalls the last conversation she had with him was a terrible fight in which she seemed to be against something Aster was trying to enact. Despite her pleas, he coldly rebukes her arguments and refuses to listen to her words anymore, reminding her how he is basically the law since he has the strongest lineage magic and everything in their nation is decided based on the levels of such. Continuing to be uncaring toward her, he tells her that she only has her own inferior magic to blame if she finds such a system terrible. Back in the present, Kati finds herself at a dead end when someone calls out to her, claiming that they have finally found her. As she turns around to face the person who has caught her, it turns out to be none other than Chris himself, who has also grown up. Still wearing his usual smug look, he tells her to stop resisting arrest since she has been suspected of plotting against the state. Keeping a strong front, she tells him to give up, pointing out that he has no evidence for the accusation. She even pulls out the rank card, reminding him that he would be overstepping his authority by arresting the daughter of a duke. Even so, Chris is not intimidated by her claim, admitting that though he has no charge, he was personally ordered by Aster himself to arrest her. He goes on to claim that Aster will be the one to decide whether she is innocent or guilty, and that all she needs to do is turn herself in for the judgment. Of course, Kati does not trust Chris's words at all, knowing that if she lets herself get arrested, it is the equivalent of her admitting her guilt. Thus, she starts to activate her magic circle, unwilling to yield to him. Unbothered by her actions, Chris simply dismisses it as a criminal attempt to escape, though Kati stands her ground and orders him to withdraw, soon activating her lineage magic named Soteria Trivia. At this, Chris proceeds to prepare a counterattack, unwilling to let her go. Unfortunately for Kati, Chris ends up defeating her quickly and approaches her to finally put her under arrest. As he does this, she is reminded of Hermes, who she remembers as the only one who would praise her magic no matter how weak or horrible it looked. When she cried over how many people called her magic disgusting, Hermes was the only person who called it beautiful instead. She remembers how his words had saved her countless times, and yet she was still unable to save him. As the nostalgic memories of their childhood days together appear in her mind, Kati cannot help but wish for him to save her once again. At that very moment, someone accepts her wish and appears in front of her, shielding her from Chris's attacks. The mysterious young man who has saved her admits that he does not know what is the context of the situation, though all that matters to him is that Kati was in trouble. As he turns his head back to her and greets her with a warm smile, it is clearly revealed to be Hermes, who has grown up as well. While Kati is shocked by his reappearance, he simply tells her that he has become a great mage and returned to her, just like he promised to in the past. As both Chris and Kati are taken aback by Hermes' sudden reappearance, Hermes reminisces about the royal capital, as it has been a while since he was there when he was first exiled by his family and met his master, Rose. The story then goes back into the past to the day after he was taken in by Rose, in which he wakes up in bed frantically after experiencing a nightmare. As the then 10-year-old Hermes takes in his surroundings, finding himself in an unfamiliar house, it is revealed that he has been sharing a bed with someone who is stirring awake as well. It turns out to be Rose, who finds no issue sleeping next to him the previous night, though it clearly flusters Hermes instead. Seeing Hermes' confusion on his face, Rose tells him that he fell asleep shortly after his acceptance of her offer on the way back to her house, so she could not bear to wake him up once they arrived. Instead, she simply cleaned his body and changed him into a set of spare pajamas, then tucked him into bed next to her. Shyly, he thanks her for the hospitality, to which she once again lightheartedly assures him that it is nothing to worry about as she ends up sleeping soundly with him as a makeshift body pillow anyway. Once they have settled down, Rose suggests that she give him a tour of the house since he will be living with her from then on as her only disciple, and even offers to make breakfast afterward. At this, he nervously takes her hand and lets her guide him. As she shows him around the house, Hermes still is unable to properly wrap his head around the sudden turn of events and how his luck has turned for the better. His self-doubts soon start to enter his mind again, making him wonder if he is truly deserving of such luck. Luckily, Rose notices this and quickly tries to change the topic to distract him, showing him to the spare room she has in the house that will become his own room. However, her plan backfires when she opens the door and finds that it has become a makeshift storage room over the years, which she has forgotten about. Hermes reacts to this like a kicked puppy, thinking that he deserves to have such a room. Desperate to cheer him up, Rose changes the topic again and suggests that she will make them breakfast to lighten the mood, though much to her dismay, she ends up accidentally burning her cooking to a crisp, which only makes things worse for the young boy's mentality. It turns out that Rose has not cooked in the last 10 years, nor has she been maintaining the spare rooms in the house either, which is why her plans have been backfiring. Seeing how Rose is kicking herself over the mishaps, Hermes decides to play along and help change the subject once more, proactively asking her to teach him some magic. At this, Rose regains her composure and accepts. Later, she brings him to her personal library, which is filled with countless books about magic. While Hermes is in awe, Rose takes the chance to apologize to him for failing at basic household tasks and making him feel unwelcome, despite how she insisted on taking him under her wing. Even so, she proceeds to crouch down to his eye level and reassure him that he is truly like a miracle to her, full of sincerity. With a serious face, she tells him that she will never betray him nor give up on him as long as he has genuine feelings toward magic. Hearing her words makes Hermes also aware of his own subconsciously cautious behavior around her, as he kept her at arm's length due to fear of being abandoned, just like what happened with his father. Now directly assured by her, Hermes also apologizes for being wary of her, and finally opens his heart to her, happily calling her master and asking her to take care of him from then on. His childish innocence captures Rose's heart once more as she pulls him into a bear hug, and with that, they finally accept each other as master and student. Later that night, Hermes falls asleep while reading in the library, and Rose ends up covering him with a blanket affectionately. It is then revealed that she seems to have an ulterior motive behind training him into a competent mage, as she believes that he will be the one to fully master a certain type of magic that she is currently working on developing. As time flies by, Hermes soon grows into the current age he is in the present, and he bids Rose farewell. After training for 5 years under her, he has decided to leave on his own journey back to the royal capital, not only so that he can put her teachings to good use, but also so that he can find his own magic style by witnessing others' magic. Even so, Rose still cannot help but whine at how she does not want him to leave her, as she has already developed a deep attachment to him and cannot bear to live without him anymore. This is not only due to their bond as mentor-mentee, but also because Hermes has been in charge of all the housework once he was old enough to do it. After venting out her feelings, Rose finally decides to accept his departure and suddenly puts on a serious face, reminding him that what she has been teaching him is still nothing more than the fundamentals, as it all ultimately depends on him to choose how to utilize such magic. She also warns that the royal capital is a cruel place, as it is swarmed with wicked and cunning people who will do anything to keep their power over others. She asks him once again if he is still prepared to witness such injustices, to which he confirms that he is determined to fulfill a few goals he has that require him there. In the end, he cannot stay with her forever and must continue forward in life to grow. At this, she gives him a hug goodbye and promises to achieve some admirable feats as well while he is gone so that they both grow as people. Then proceeds to cheer him on to show how strong he has become to those who have underestimated him. As he runs off, content and confident, Rose shouts that she loves him as her disciple and quietly hopes that he is able to take back all of his desires and dreams. Back in the present, as teenage Hermes faces teenage Kati, he thinks about how he is finally able to repay the favor he owes her in the past, determined to save her with his own kind of magic. Meanwhile, Kati is still in disbelief as she questions him if he is truly the same Hermes she knew from childhood, to which he confirms his identity. He confesses that he does not know what is going on between her and Chris, but still decides to step in since she is in trouble. Before she can respond, Chris interrupts their reunion and asks him again if he is Hermes, to which the latter once again confirms. Hermes asks if he should still call Chris his older brother, which he rejects as he points out that he has already been disowned by the Friendbride family 5 years prior. Although Chris finds it annoying that he has reappeared, he decides to pay him no mind and still demands that he hand over Kati, as she is a criminal. At this, Kati quickly clarifies that he has no basis for such an accusation, though she tells Hermes not to involve himself since he is a commoner and the current dispute is between nobles. Even though her words are somewhat harsh, Hermes does not leave as he sees how she is trembling in fear already. Instead, he reminds her of how she always showed him kindness and stayed by his side even when he was abandoned by his family, and hence he has decided to repay the favor by helping her in ways such as getting rid of the harassing noble, Chris. While Kati is flustered by his reliable and caring words, Chris feels his ego and pride are being threatened by his former younger brother, so he starts activating his magic to attack them once more. Of course, Hermes is already very familiar with Chris's lineage magic, as he was the main victim of such magic back during his childhood. Sarcastically, he tells Chris that he is glad that the first magic he will be witnessing back in the royal capital is none other than his, and proceeds to activate his own magic circle to show off just how much he has been training as well. Much like Rose's first appearance and attack style, Hermes chants out a lengthy spell to activate his magic, which turns out to be creation magic named the Steel of Origin. Although Kati is taken aback by the appearance of creation magic, Chris brushes it off angrily, unwilling to accept the idea that Hermes has been able to acquire a superior kind of magic as he remembers how he was once neglected when their father heavily favored Hermes over him. With his guard up, Hermes looks at his older brother with a complicated expression, though Chris suppresses his emotions and reminds himself that his main goal is only to capture Kati so he can do whatever he wants with Hermes during their battle. He suddenly launches another attack against the pair, to which Hermes easily shields them and then proceeds to remember the first few teachings about the Steel of Origin from Rose. Back then, Rose explains that the foundation of the spell is to analyze and recreate magic, which essentially means that its main purpose is to copy other kinds of magic and recreate it. Since Rose possesses lineage magic as well, she's unable to fully utilize the spell due to restrictions. However, Hermes has the freedom to copy any kind of magic in the world and recreate it in his own way. In the present, Hermes proceeds to put what he has learned and trained into good use, effectively using the Steel of Origin to mirror Chris's lineage magic and basically counterattack with the exact same spell. Chris is completely taken aback by this, though Hermes is simply relieved that it worked out way better than he expected. After all, before the fight, he never got the proper chance to try out the copying mechanism in practice, and he only knew it was possible in theory. Regardless, Chris refuses to admit defeat as he proceeds to have a breakdown and claims that he will always be superior to Hermes. At this, Hermes takes advantage of his older brother's mental instability and attacks him once more. The latter is unable to respond in time and ends up getting thrown back by the spell, causing the other soldiers to rush over to him and check on his condition. Seeing that they have them distracted, Hermes and Kati quickly slip away as Chris screams at his men to eliminate them. A while later, the pair manages to escape Chris and the royal guards, and they finally stop to catch their breath. Hermes is finally able to take a moment and see how beautiful Kati has grown up to be, although the latter immediately starts scolding him for disappearing for the past 5 years as she tries searching for him to no avail. Her anger soon turns into concern, and she asks him why he never thought to rely on her when he could have come to her father's duchy and requested aid. As she continues to ramble on and tear up over how much overwhelming fear she has for his safety, Hermes lets her lean against his chest and apologizes solemnly. And just like that, Kati forgives him for worrying her and thanks him for staying alive after all that time. As she continues to sob in his arms, she also apologizes for being unable to save him in the past as well. Later, once Kati has calmed down, she questions his whereabouts for the past 5 years and how he has been able to make a living. At this, he reveals that he is actually unemployed and has not decided on where he will work, to which Kati immediately takes the chance to give him a job offer at her house, much to his surprise. Meanwhile, back in the palace, Chris is begging on his knees for forgiveness from Aster as he has failed to bring Kati back. The latter does not show any mercy or compassion to the former, giving him a cold glare as he summarizes the report about how Kati was saved by an unknown mage. It turns out that Chris left out Hermes' exact identity for the sake of his own pride, as he still refuses to acknowledge that he was defeated by the latter. Ultimately, Aster dismisses the mistake, citing that he must be going through a test by God to see if he is able to forgive the mistakes of his subjects as future king. Nonetheless, he still cannot let Kati roam free, as apparently she has been getting in the way of his plans, and hence he deems her as a danger to the country. He tells Chris that they must figure out the true identity of the mage who helped her, much to his shock. With no choice but to comply, Chris accepts the task and excuses himself, leaving Aster to scheme about getting rid of such mages who do not know their place in the overall picture, as he already has no problem doing so in the past as well. Soon enough, Hermes arrives back at Kati's family estate with her after she insists on hiring him at her house. Although he recalls visiting multiple times during his childhood, the size of the estate still never fails to amaze him. As the pair make their way in, they are soon stopped by a maid who has been worried over Kati's whereabouts. She immediately starts tending to her, noticing how her clothes are dirty and she has sustained a mysterious injury, though Kati reassures her that she is fine overall. The maid Layla finally notices Hermes' presence next to her after she calms down and asks who he is, to which Kati reintroduces him and reminds her that he was a fellow noble and her childhood friend who often came to visit. At this, Layla instantly remembers him, though also recalls that he was exiled after it was found out that he possessed zero aptitude for lineage magic. Nonetheless, Layla expresses her relief at how he has been alive and safe the entire time, which is a pleasant surprise to him. Kati joins in and reassures him that he is safe with her people, as the Trachea house is different from those of the Friendbreed house, filling him up with a sense of warmth. Soon enough, they arrive at Duke Jurgen von Trachea's office, and Layla announces their presence. He welcomes Hermes in with a polite smile and immediately thanks him for saving his daughter as they settle down, though the latter stays humble. Jurgen goes on to ask about his unique magic skill that Kati has told him about, so Hermes proceeds to activate the Steel of Origin, explaining that it was taught to him by a certain person. When Jurgen prompts him to reveal his master's name, Hermes apologizes that he cannot tell him, as he has promised Rose in the past to not bring her up or reveal her identity as his master to others. At this, Jurgen suddenly switches to a cold and calculating expression as he points out that he is asking as a figure of authority above him, and questions if he still will not answer then. This side of Jurgen catches Hermes off guard, though he still insists that he will not tell him. At this, the former questions if someone of higher authority than him is preventing him from telling him, to which Hermes honestly explains that he has already given his word to his master not to reveal their identity, and he would like to stay as a loyal disciple to the person he respects the most. Hearing Hermes' answer makes Jurgen smile, so he decides to drop the subject and moves the conversation along, asking more about the exact details of Hermes' magic, such as if it is restricted by flaws like only being able to be used once or having a limit of overall number of uses. At this, Hermes is confused by the mention of such flaws, telling Jurgen earnestly that his magic does not have either restriction and that he is able to use a spell however many times he wants once he has recreated it. In addition to that, he will not lose older spells, even if he ends up learning an abundance of new ones. This reveal shocks Kati, though once Hermes double confirms the truth, Jurgen admits that such type of magic would definitely turn the noble society upside down, especially since it is not lineage magic. Regardless, Jurgen has one last important question for Hermes, which exactly is his objective, as it is very suspicious why Hermes would even want to return to the royal capital when he possesses such strong magic. In addition to that, his motivation behind saving Kati is still a mystery, and he cannot help but be suspicious as to why the former would even risk his life involving himself with Kai when he was not even aware of the exact context. At this, Hermes decides to once again honestly tell the truth, as he understands why Kati's father would be suspicious of him from an outsider's perspective. He proceeds to confess that his main objective is to be able to create magic of his own, as recreating other spells is nothing more than a way of self-defense and training for him to eventually reach his end goal. With his genuine love for magic, he wants to be able to create his own unique kind that can be as beautiful as or even more beautiful than other existing magic. After all, he has been dreaming about such a thing since he was a child, as well as his master's dream that was entrusted to him. In regard to rescuing Kati, he recalls how even though she was in a hopelessly disadvantaged situation, she still tried to be selfless and prevent Hermes from getting involved and hurt for her sake by trying to drive him away, making him realize that she is still the same kind girl he knew from his childhood who would be his #1 cheerleader. Hence, he simply could not believe someone like her would be a real criminal, prompting him to help her regardless. Hearing his words, Jurgen admits that he feels that it is too naive of a reason for Hermes to risk his life for Kati, though he still cannot help but feel glad that he is able to trust his daughter that much. Thus, he decides that he should be able to rely on Hermes to protect Kati as her personal guard, though Kati herself is still feeling quite flustered from hearing the good things Hermes said about her right in front of her father. At this, Jurgen teases that he understands her feelings toward Hermes, though reminds her to keep them hidden as she is still presented as a duke's daughter in society, while Hermes stays oblivious to the fact. Later that night, Hermes settles into his new room, citing how lucky he is to be able to get stable accommodation the first night he returns to the capital. He then decides to go out onto the balcony, letting his thoughts roam as he predicts what will be happening in the near future due to the recent incident between Kati and Chris. While he believes that Jurgen will do his best to protect the incident against Chris, it is still worrying that the latter's orders came directly from Prince Aster himself. Due to this, he decides that he will do his best at his new job, taking the role of Kati's bodyguard seriously. At that moment, Kati announces her presence and joins Hermes out on the balcony, telling him that she would like to chat with him more to catch up on other things. However, Hermes says quietly and does not answer immediately as he ends up staring at her for a bit. She questions his actions, to which he bluntly states that he has noticed how beautiful she has grown up to be, flustering her greatly. While taken aback, she recalls that he has always been blunt when complimenting her, so she ends up calling him out for his formal tone, as he has refrained from calling her by her childhood nickname. At this, Hermes points out that the gap in their social statuses is different from before, as he is a commoner and working under her as her attendant. Blushing, Kati admits that he has a point, but still requests that he goes back to talking with them casually like they are friends whenever they are alone and away from the public eye. Although a bit confused by her motivations, Hermes decides to comply and calls her by her old nickname once again, satisfying her. Even so, he sighs at how it has been a while for him to speak in an informal tone, as he has been living alone with his master in the countryside for a long time, so he has been speaking politely all the time until then. Curious, Kati asks him what kind of person his master is, to which he refrains from spilling any personal details, but sincerely talks about how his master is always amazing when it concerns magic. In fact, he believes that his master is the #1 mage in the world in her personal opinion. Hermes soon redirects the topic back to Kati, asking about her well-being for the past 5 years. At this, she confesses that a lot has changed since the last time they saw each other, and reveals that her engagement with Aster was actually just broken off the previous month, making her currently look like a noble daughter who has been abandoned by the prince in noble society. The next day, Hermes starts wearing the formal uniform of being Kati's personal attendant, which involves him dressed up nicely in a suit. Layla praises how well he suits the uniform, but then goes on to inform him that there are no other servants in the household who are close in age to Kati, hence, she never had anyone to open up to ever since he went missing. Concerned, he asks if she at least has any noble friends, to which Layla sadly reveals that she does not due to being unable to establish proper mutual trust with other noble ladies. Thus, Layla requests that he do his best to be Kati's supporter who will understand her no matter what and never desert her. At this, Hermes is naturally determined to support the lonely Kati, just like how she once supported him in the past. Afterward, he comes out to meet up with Kati, who is immediately caught off guard by how handsome he looks in the uniform. While Layla advises her in a whisper to get used to how Hermes looks and not come off as so obvious about her feelings, Hermes misunderstands her reaction and worries that he looks strange in the suit instead. Regardless, the two of them move past it and formally accept each other as attendants and attendees. The story then suddenly enters into a flashback wherein a young Kati is chasing after her mother, who seems to be leaving. Hearing her pleas, her mother turns around and envelops young Kati in a warm embrace, then reminding her that their magic is not for oppressing or ruling over others, but rather it should be used to protect their loved ones and the weak. She adds that only those who use their magic for righteous and just reasons are allowed to be called real nobles, then proceed to turn away and leave. At this, young Kati continues to call out to her mother to wait, but before she can catch up to her, her mother praises her for becoming a great noble. Suddenly, the scenario changes, and young Kati finds herself standing over a cliff looking down onto a village burning away. As tears well up in her eyes, she cries at how she did not want such a scenario to happen and continues to call out to her mother. At that moment, Kati wakes up in her bed in the present, with tears in her eyes and her arm outstretched toward the ceiling. Realizing that it was all just a sad dream, she proceeds to get up and greet her mother good morning while looking at a framed portrait of her family. It turns out that a few days have already passed since Hermes was appointed as her personal guard, and in the Travika estate, Jurgen is in his office receiving a report from one of his soldiers. The soldier reports that some of the villagers in the dukedom have been harmed by monsters, and they have since discovered that there is a dungeon nearby that is believed to be the monster's lair. Looking over the map, Jurgen notices that the dungeon seems to be right next to the border with Count Eldridge's territory. Although he would like to exterminate the monsters as soon as possible, he has already dispatched a number of their soldiers to conquer another dungeon. He decides that the only course of action left is to simply evacuate the villagers for the meantime, when suddenly Kati chimes in that she will lead a subjugation group instead. Before he can even object, Kati points out that they have a duty to save and protect the people from danger with their magic, so she cannot bring herself to just sit idly and watch in silence as they suffer from monster attacks. She even reminds her father of her mother's words to become a good noble, to which the latter finds that he cannot refute her after all. Even so, he assigns some of his soldiers to accompany her and tells her to return immediately if she senses that it is simply too dangerous to handle on her own. Meanwhile, listening on the sidelines, Hermes recalls what a kind and caring person Kati's mother was. Unfortunately, she passed away when they were only 6 years old, as she had sacrificed herself while fighting a horde of monsters that attacked the city. Even so, it is clear that Kati still keeps her mother in her mind. Later, as Kati and Hermes are making their way through the forest with her father's guards, the former asks the latter if he has ever fought with monsters. He confirms that he has as part of his training period, though she still goes on to explain that dungeons specifically are strange and atypical structures that serve as monsters' lairs. Due to their complicated layout, it serves as an advantageous base for the monsters, and if left alone, they may end up breeding more and more, which would lead to catastrophic events. Just as she continues to explain them further to Hermes, one of the guards suddenly pipes up and insists how he cannot agree to Hermes' employment as a bodyguard, thinking of him as an incompetent child who will only pose as a burden to the group. At this, Kati quickly shuts him down and clarifies that she made him her guard because of a proper evaluation of his abilities, and not simply because of her personal connection with him. However, before she is able to fully vouch for Hermes, they are suddenly interrupted by a certain other noble with accompanying guards, who Kati immediately recognizes as Count Eldridge, whose territory borders theirs near the dungeon. As she questions his presence, Count Eldridge claims that he is also leading a subjugation group to conquer the dangerously active dungeon. Kati does not back down easily though, pointing out that the dungeon is located within her family's jurisdiction, and hence he has no right over it. Even so, the Count insists that he can lend a helping hand anyway, though it is clear that he has an ulterior motive. As Hermes' expression turns darker, Kati's other guards suspect that the Count intends to take advantage of the situation and steal credit as well as loot the dungeon while they are not looking. At this, Kati continues to stand her ground and refuse his help when the Count decides to step out of line and insult her for being a defective lady who was abandoned by their prince since she is unable to use magic. This seems to strike a nerve within her, and though Hermes wonders what the Count is implying, the latter continues to berate her for being unfit to be a noble. At that moment, before he is able to finish insulting her, a sudden force of magic appears above the Count's and his guards' heads. It turns out to come from Hermes, as he noticed a monster was sneaking up behind the Count and took the liberty to help them ahead of time. While the guards are caught off guard by the monsters, they are more shocked at how Hermes was able to use such powerful magic without even chanting aloud. At this, Hermes feigns a humble persona, though his words are filled with sarcasm when he mockingly points out how the Count did not even notice the sneak attack when he claimed to be someone who was chosen by God. While Kati is flustered and flattered by his actions, the Count berates Hermes for acting arrogant against him as a so-called lowly servant. However, Hermes is not intimidated at all as he continues to subtly mock the Count's clear lack of skills and awareness. Humiliated, the latter takes his leave early, though swears to remember Hermes' face to teach him a lesson in the future. Once the Count's group leaves, Kati and the other guards find themselves speechless as they watch Hermes in awe. Instead of relishing in the achievement of chasing away the arrogant noble, Hermes apologizes for losing her cool, though there is clearly a good effect on the people around him. While Kati is flustered over how he defended her honor, the soldier who previously had no confidence in Hermes suddenly pops back up and passionately apologizes to him for ever doubting him. With newfound motivation and determination in his eyes, he hopes to get along with Hermes and protect Kati together. And with that, the group continues to enter the dungeon, and with Hermes' incredible magic easily manages to clear out the first few levels. As they continue to make their way through it, they soon stumble upon what seems to be the dungeon's boss, which looks to be a gigantic armored monster. Hermes recognizes it as a tortoise dragon, and as per his experience, advises Kati that they should retreat for the time being and report back to Jurgen for further instructions. At this, she agrees. But before they are able to leave undetected, the tortoise dragon wakes up at that moment and roars loudly, causing the path they are on to collapse. After the rumbling dies down, the group is thankfully safe due to Hermes' shield, though unfortunately, the exit has been completely cut off. Instead, they have landed right on the same platform as the tortoise dragon, making them more vulnerable to its attacks and unable to escape. As the tortoise dragon continues to roar and start to attack the group, the soldiers form a defense line to protect Kati while Hermes tries his best to counterattack. Unfortunately, the latter notes that the dragon's defenses are very tough to break, putting them at a major disadvantage. At this, the soldiers turn to Kati for help, as it seems that her lineage magic may help weaken its defenses enough for the soldiers to deal effective blows. She immediately activates her lineage magic and casts a spell onto the dragon, though misses it slightly as it moves around quite quickly. Seeing that she is struggling, Hermes joins in and helps her put up a blood chain around the dragon's body, preventing it from moving too much. Unfortunately for them, such a spell is still useless on it, as they find that the dragon is capable of using barrier magic as well to block such magical attacks. As Hermes faces this strong foe, he is reminded of a similar kind of battle he was in that happened just a year prior, which was against a red dragon. Recalling the lesson he learned from that battle, he remembers that there was only one way to defeat such a monster. While the group is slowly getting backed into a corner, the soldiers tell Kati to retreat with Hermes as they do their best to buy them some time. Kati refuses to leave them behind, though the soldiers reassure her that she is simply leaving to get reinforcements rather than abandoning them. Before she can protest, they are interrupted by another attack from the monster, making her panic as she wonders what her mother would do instead. At that moment, Hermes reaches out to stabilize Kati and reveals to her that he knows of only one attack that can pierce through the monster's barrier. However, it requires some time to charge it up and chant before he is able to release it. Hence, he requests their help to stop the monster from moving for at least 5 seconds as he charges up the spell. After telling her so, he then proceeds to move around the monster in a very agile and swift manner by strengthening his body with magic, much to the shock of the soldiers. Even so, they still have his back as they do their best to distract the monster from Hermes and soon cause it to fall down onto its knees. At this, Kati proceeds to take the chance and use her lineage magic to prevent it from moving momentarily at her best. Just as she is nearing her limit, Hermes appears by her side and praises her for a job well done at buying him some time. And with that, he activates his magic and chants a certain spell aloud named Alternate Dragon Breed, which results in him letting out a huge flame to burn the monster away. Eventually, nothing is left of the monster but its shell, and it proceeds to collapse onto the ground. Seeing how it is no longer getting back up, the soldiers cheer at how they have successfully defeated it. Kati questions what kind of magic Hermes used against it, to which he explains that it is a magic spell used by the red dragon he fought before, since the Steel of Origin allows him to recreate any kind of magic. That also includes magic used by monsters as well. He remembers how much magic used by high-ranking monsters can even surpass lineage magic, which is why he decided to recreate that specific spell to help defeat the tortoise dragon. At this, Kati cannot help but cry at how Hermes has become an amazing mage, just like he said he would, and yet she is still unable to do anything at all in comparison. Although Hermes tries to comfort her and point out that she contributed a lot to the defeat of the tortoise dragon, she goes on to reveal why so many other nobles have been referring to her as a defective noble who is unable to use magic. This is because, even though her lineage magic is known to be one of the strongest kinds among the noble families, to the point that it is able to rival the magic of high-ranking monsters, she is unable to output a strong enough amount every time. Due to this, she believes herself to be a burden, as she seems to always put others in danger due to her weakness and inability to fully utilize her magic. As she asks if Hermes is disappointed with how she turned out, Hermes answers it with another question instead, which is if she ever felt disappointed when she found out he possessed zero aptitude for his lineage magic. At this, she immediately shakes her head no, to which he tells her that he holds the exact same answer to her own question. Even so, Kati tells him that she could never believe it was impossible for him to not become a great mage, to which he once again states that his answer is the same regarding her state. However, he does acknowledge that there is indeed something interfering with her ability to use her lineage magic, and hence requests her permission to let him analyze and recreate it to help figure out the cause of the problem. At this, Kati questions what is the point behind Hermes recreating her lineage magic, to which he explains that he must have a deep understanding of the spell to recreate it. In fact, most of the time the level of understanding he gains of the spell is at a deeper level than any of the inheritors have, which he cites to be a weak point of lineage magic. He compares it to how humans are able to move their limbs around without fully knowing about their internal structures and organs. Much like that, most inheritors of lineage magic are able to use such magic without knowing the full extent of it due to being naturally attuned to it. Because of this, many inheritors do not notice hidden effects within the magic, or may even have incorrect understandings about their true nature. Hence, if he is able to analyze and recreate the Travika's lineage magic, he may be able to find the hidden problem within it and ascertain the real reason behind why Kati's magic is malfunctioning. Although she is intrigued by this, she is unable to give him a proper answer before they are interrupted by Count Eldridge, who has arrived just to take credit for conquering the dungeon and looting its magical artifacts. At this, Kati immediately tries to apprehend him for simply doing as he pleases, though he simply ignores and proceeds up the steps to find that there is indeed a legendary artifact sitting in the dungeon. He already fantasizes about the hefty reward he will receive from presenting the royal family with the artifact when he is snapped out of his daydreams by Kati once again. Standing her ground, she points out that her people did all the work conquering the dungeon, so he has no right to steal from them, but the Count once again berates her and tries to twist the blame onto her, much to the anger of her soldiers. Kati does not back down though, telling him that they can easily prove who truly conquered the dungeon by tracing the magic left on the monster's carcass, to which the Count states that he can simply get rid of the evidence as there are no other witnesses in the dungeon anyway to prove otherwise. Saying this, he immediately proceeds to activate his lineage magic to threaten and bully Kati's group into giving up, even challenging her to fight against him for the credits. Although she hates to admit it, Kati knows that she is no match for the Count's magic with the current level of her own magic, though before she accepts his challenge impulsively, Hermes chimes in with some useful advice. With a confident smile, he tells her that the activation of magic is greatly influenced by the caster's emotions, implying that one of the major reasons why she is unable to fully utilize her lineage magic is because she is subconsciously holding herself back with some buried emotions. Hence, he advises her to look deep into herself and properly grasp her feelings so that she has greater control over her magic. With that, he asks her what is the main reason behind her usage of magic, making her search for the true answer to the question within herself. On the surface level, she will be using her magic because she was provoked by Count Eldridge, though soon digs deeper and assumes it is because of her long-term goal to become a just and righteous noble. However, it is not that either, as she finally realizes that her goal has actually been weighing her down, as she is pressuring herself with such high expectations to meet her mother's standard. In truth, the real reason behind why she uses her magic is something entirely different. This is not revealed directly to the audience, though as she embraces her feelings regarding it, the energy around her magic starts to grow stronger than ever before, as she looks visibly infuriated by Count Eldridge's audacity. The latter is, of course, not used to such strong energy from her and is caught entirely off guard, but before he can figure out the situation, Kati's magic only gets stronger and envelops them even more as she officially chants out the spell for her lineage magic, Soteria Trivia. At this, Count Eldridge is finally intimidated by her magic, though quickly tries to fake confidence and fearlessness, claiming that it only looks strong. He also taunts that she would not be able to attack him directly without suffering consequences, to which Hermes joins in and coldly repeats Count Eldridge's own words previously. They can simply get rid of the evidence, especially with no witnesses around. As Hermes proceeds to use magic to control the monster's carcass, he points out how he can simply drop it onto the Count, which would leave no trace of magic or evidence against Kati's group. In the end, they can simply cover up the accident as him getting eliminated by the monster beforehand, intimidating the Count even further. Cornered, he tries to call on his accompanying guards, though they have already been knocked out by Kati's own guards as they can no longer let the Count run his mouth about their master. Defeated, Count Eldridge finally begs them to spare his life, to which Hermes points out he must do something first to let them do so. At this, the former finally gives up the artifact to Kati and her group. Once they have taken care of the Count with him running away, flustered and embarrassed, the group approaches the artifact proudly. Kati expresses how, because of his advice, she was finally able to use her lineage magic at a stronger level much more naturally for the first time, and even asks if he did something to her. At this, Hermes insists that it was all due to her own personal powers, and he simply gave her a tip in unlocking that side of herself. He goes on to praise how beautiful her magic looks, causing her to blush once again. Additionally, he also clarifies that it is not even the full extent of her magic just yet, to which she finally gives her permission for him to analyze and recreate her lineage magic to help her utilize it even more. A few days after the dungeon mission, Kati is simply relaxing back at home and having tea time when she is in awe over the delicious black tea Hermes has brewed for her. He explains that he used to make black tea for his master all the time, which also explains why he is so good at other household chores as well. Glad that he can be of service and bring little trouble to the house, Hermes then turns to Kati and reassures her with a confident smile that she can ask him to do anything she desires. Caught off guard by his charming gesture, Kati ends up choking on her tea and spilling it all over the tablecloth. At this, he leaves briefly to bring another tablecloth replacement, during which Layla bluntly asks Kati if she has romantic feelings toward Hermes purely based on her obvious reactions to him. Kati does not even need to answer it verbally, as her flushed expression shows as clear as day that she does like him. Layla suggests that she confess her feelings to Hermes, though Kati immediately rejects this idea as she points out that they not only have different social statuses currently, but her engagement with Aster has just been broken off a month prior. The last thing she wants is for Hermes to assume she is a fickle woman. At this, Layla sympathizes with Kati over her complex situation, though the latter also adds that she feels Hermes has grown up to be much more mature than her. Due to this, he also comes off as more distant and not as love-stuck as her, and she does not want to be in a position where she shows more interest in him romantically than the other way around. In short, Layla concludes that the young lady would prefer if Hermes acted more like a typical young man in love with his heart on his sleeve. With this in mind, she recommends that in order for her to achieve such a thing with Hermes, Kati must go on a date with him, much to the latter's confusion. Finally registering what Layla has suggested to her, Kati cannot help but feel flustered over even the thought of going on a date with Hermes, though Layla reassures her she can help plan out the date, which is sure to bring out the youthfulness of love within both Kati and Hermes. Before Kati can fully reject the idea, Layla adds that the date can be a good excuse for her to take a break, especially after how much the dungeon conquest took a toll on her. In addition to that, she reveals that her father, Jurgen, has been worried over her as well, especially since he noticed how it seems she is trying to grow up too fast to become a responsible noble like her mother, and hence feels like her childhood innocence and freedom are quickly being stripped of her. Hearing about her father's concerns about her softens Kati's heart, and as Layla points out, her being able to act like a typical girl her age for at least one day should be able to ease her father's worries about her seriousness. Convinced, Kati decides to ask Hermes out after all. The next day, Cady ends up successfully asking Hermes out as the pair make their way out to town together. As they look down from above, Hermes is hit with a sense of nostalgia as he remembers his countless visits to the royal capital when he was younger. Meanwhile, Cady recalls one last assurance Layla gave her before she left, which is the fact that nobody is judging her for the engagement annulment between her and Prince Aster, so she should not worry about looking like a fickle woman when she has every right to move on with her life. As she is also reminded of how Hermes helped her improve her control over her lineage magic, she decides to be bold and grab onto the latter's hand wordlessly. Hermes is understandably caught off guard by her gesture, though she manages to use the excuse that she does not want to be accidentally separated from him in the crowd when they enter town. Thus, the pair ends up walking around town hand in hand, albeit it starts off a bit awkward between them. However, as they continue to wander around and Cady ends up taking the role of a makeshift tour guide, they soon become more comfortable with each other, and Hermes is also reminded of when they used to walk around holding hands during their childhood. Even so, the two still cannot fully shake off the feeling of nervousness when holding hands with a different gender as teenagers. Soon enough, they bump into an acquaintance of Cady's, a middle-aged woman who runs a jewelry store. Since Hermes is unaware of how they are connected to each other, the latter explains that her business did not go out of business purely thanks to Cady's help, and she owes her a lot of gratitude. She even goes on to point out that nobles usually would not bother paying attention or even helping a modest shop like hers, so Cady truly is one of a kind despite her insisting that she only did her duty as a noble. As she finishes explaining the story, she notices how Cady is holding hands with Hermes and asks if they are on a secret date, much to her embarrassment. Cady immediately clarifies that she is simply showing her new attendant around town, so the woman offers to show them her jewelry shop. While the pair look around inside, Cady shocks the woman when she confesses that she actually does not know much about fashion, as she uses the excuse that it was never a necessity for her, though leaving out the fact that even if she did dress up to the nines, Aster was not the type of person who looked her way. Sensing that there is a certain type of melancholy in Cady's demeanor, Hermes snaps her out of her thoughts by confessing how he enjoys seeing pretty things, and that if he had the chance to see her donning one of the pieces of jewelry from the store, he would enjoy it a lot. His straightforward but sincere words fluster Cady immensely, as even the shopkeeper teases how sweet of a couple they are. Embarrassed, she proceeds to drag Hermes out and leave, though still promising to come back to the jewelry store another day. Meanwhile, Hermes still stays oblivious to how much his words affect the young lady. Back in the manor, Cady cannot help but half gush and half rant about how brazen Hermes can be while saying such cheesy but sincere compliments to her. Even Layla agrees that it is more than just him presenting maturely. Even so, his words about wanting to see her adorned in pretty jewelry echo throughout her mind, and she decides to take them to heart. She talks to Layla about how there is going to be a party soon, to which the latter confirms it is to be hosted in her honor since she presented such a valuable artifact to the royal family. At this, Cady shyly requests Layla to help her pick the dress that would best suit her, as well as pick a certain accessory from a certain jewelry store to wear to the event as well. The story then skips to the day of the celebration party, during which Hermes is nervously looking over the foyer at how many nobles are attending it. It turns out that Layla has insisted to put him on escort duty and have him accompany Cady during the party, though he does not know why since he is only an attendant. At that moment, Cady calls out to him from behind, and he is surprised to find her dressed up beautifully in a gown that perfectly suits her. Shyly, she asks him how she looks, to which he is initially at a loss for words. As he regains his composure, he apologizes for his speechlessness, though admits that she truly looks incredibly beautiful that night, flustering her once more. As the party commences, Cady has to leave Hermes' side for the time being to socialize with some of the other nobles, all while other older nobles gossip over how she is bound to grow into a beautiful woman with flawless education and class, as well as the incident of her overpowering Count Eldridge for the artifact and finally being able to improve her lineage magic. Hermes stays up in the foyer, observing Cady from afar when he's approached by Jurgen, who thanks him for helping his daughter overcome her flaws when using magic. At this, Hermes insists that he only gave her some tips, and most of it was achieved by herself, though Jurgen still acknowledges that Hermes has been nothing but a good influence on Cady. At this, Hermes cannot help but ask Jurgen once again why he decided to trust him, even though it would have been understandable for him to suspect Hermes of being a double agent for his own house of Friendbreed. Jurgen repeats that his answer is the same as before. It is because of how Hermes genuinely trusts Cady in spite of how long they have been apart. However, he also does admit that it is additionally because he has a general idea of who exactly Hermes' master is, as he knows that nobody else can be as extraordinary as the person he has in mind to be able to train Hermes in his creation magic. Even so, he reassures Hermes that the secret is safe with him, as he reveals that his late wife, Kati's mother, actually also had somewhat of a connection with his master when she was still alive. Although Hermes is intrigued by this, he is unable to question further as Jurgen sends him away to Kati's side. Leaving the foyer, Hermes' mind is filled with new thoughts about the subject and realizes that Jurgen may not be an ordinary person either, with how easily he was able to figure out who his master is without any clues. As he makes his way through the ballroom, he finds Kati is being approached by a seemingly overly enthusiastic nobleman. At this, Hermes immediately arrives by her side and questions the man's identity, to which the latter quickly introduces himself as Count Karl von Harnett of the West, eagerly wanting to arrange between Kati and his own son as he believes them to be a good fit for one another. Keeping a calm attitude, Kati tells the Count that she would like some time to consider his proposal first before even meeting his son, as she points out that it has only been a month since her engagement with Prince Aster was broken off. At this, the Count only gets even more antsy as he continues to shower her with endless praise, even going so far as to wonder why the second prince would let go of such a beautiful lady like her, who is full of talent and potential. He even adds that he personally thinks the prince was being too harsh on her when he broke off the engagement. At that moment, someone steps in and states how they simply cannot let go of such a remark from the Count, which is revealed to be none other than second Prince Aster himself. With his signature smirk and cold eyes, he questions what the Count said about him, much to the latter's horror. Meanwhile, Hermes realizes that he is currently face to face with someone who has brought a lot of suffering to him indirectly, as Aster was the one to give the order on his banishment from the House of Friendbreed in the first place. While Aster and Hermes find themselves locked in a stalemate, frozen as they hold eye contact with each other, Kati notices a certain young woman standing behind Aster, who she recognizes to be someone named Sarah. And this is how this segment of the manga ends. Unfortunately, there aren't enough chapters to continue. So if you're looking forward to another fascinating tale, click our best recommendation here